just to clarify, regardless what the light says back here, this is not a live video. I just like the lighting on in the background. Kind of cool, I think. Hello folks, Jason Chrisman here, JC's Bees, your Central Ohio beekeeper. We're sitting at 15 degrees this morning on January 5th. It's rather brisk outside this morning. There's a lot of beekeepers down at the big expo or the big bee convention. I know there's a lot of beekeepers that went down to that show, and looks like from what I'm seeing on Facebook, there's a pretty good turnout for all of them down there, and that's a good thing. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through some questions that people have asked me. Last year, I put out a video called Just One Question, and in that video, the viewers were able to go down in the description and ask me their questions. And I've taken 10 of them questions today, and we're going to answer them today. So without any further delay, let's dive right in. So the first question comes from Mike. Taking mite samples. Always fearful of mistakenly getting the queen into the alcohol wash. Eek. Yeah, that's a big concern for all of us beekeepers that practice the alcohol wash. There's a real simple remedy to this though, Mike. What you want to do before you go into mite washing mode is go into finding queen mode. Go through your box, find the frame that the queen is on. Remove that frame from your colony and stick it in an empty box off to the side. Or if you don't have any extra bee equipment, simply just set the frame off to the side. Maybe lean it against a tree or something for a few minutes. That way you know when you take your sample, your queen is surely not going to be in the mix. That's by far the easiest and safest method for washing your mites off your bees. So give that a try, Mike, and see how well that works for you. Our next question. Mites. Treatment schedule versus testing first and only treating when the mite wash says they need it. Well, here we go. So, mite washes. Mite washes in general, there's a group of people, and, you know, I kind of understand it to a certain degree as a farmer. They just have a hard time killing 300 bees, and that's something you've got to get past in your mind in order to move forward with the alcohol mite wash. It's difficult to kill 300 of anything. We're all living things here, and who wants to be the one to make the call that says, hey, it's your time to die? Well, as beekeepers, if we don't, then our bees die. And that's how you have to look at it. You have to look at it as the 300 bees you're taking the sample from. Those are to make the health of the colony better so they can thrive and grow. So that's why we make the decision to do that in the first place. Let's see here. Mites, treatment schedule versus testing first and only treating when the mite wash says they need it. I'm one of them people, I'm not going to lie to you, that sometimes I do mite washes, or I do mite treatments without ever taking a sample or doing a mite wash. And it's simply because time. I just don't have enough time every day to get all of my tasks done. And I would rather the mite level be lowered than to keep climbing because I don't have time to do a mite wash. I could put it off for days, you know, like today I'm going to do a mite wash, and then when the time comes and I don't have time to do it, I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow comes, I'm going to do the mite wash tomorrow. I'm going to do it. Tomorrow comes, and same problem. I just don't have time to go do mite washes on several colonies. So it's easier for me to just go ahead and treat. Is that the correct way? I ain't going to say it's wrong. But there is some advantages to doing the alcohol mite wash. One of those is you're going to learn how well your bees are able to manage the varroa mites in the colony without you impeding at all. And that could be some handy information to know, because the colonies that have lower mite levels would be the colonies that you would want to keep thriving and growing, because them genetics are showing that they're able to do something with the varroa mites. Now, there is some different strains out there. You take the ankle biter genetics. With those bees, they will actually chew on the varroa mites and kill them. But at the same time, those bees can be a little bit aggressive. And I'm a beekeeper that don't really like aggressive bees. And if they're going to be aggressive, I've got other things to do, man. I just don't really want to be out here being chased around by bees. So, treatment schedule, I would say, you always want to start out in the spring thinking about how you're going to treat mites, because if you don't, they're going to pull ahead of you. And by midsummer, your colony is going to be infested, which means your colony is going to be getting sick, weak, and dwindling. And when we're going into the summer months trying to make honey production, we want strong colonies. We want thriving colonies with thousands of bees in them. So we need to manage the mite level. So in the spring is a great time to start thinking about mite treatments. Early spring. For me here in Central Ohio, it's probably going to be later part of May, maybe into June, before I can do any mite treatments. According to the weather, we're going to have to go by the weather in your area. Now, I could go out there and do some OA, oxalic acid treatments, and I can do that as soon as, well, I could do that now if well, not 15 degrees, but I can do OA treatments or oxalic acid treatments down to about 35 degrees. The trick is you want to shoot in a little smoke, make the cluster break up a little bit. That way the vapor gets between all the bees and everybody gets a nice coating of oxalic acid, which kills the mites and does not hurt the bees. So yeah, I would say early spring is a good time to start treating varroa mites. And then you would want to follow that with another treatment for myself. I would say probably July. Of course, you always want to do your best to keep the mites at a lower level, regardless what time of year it is. But if you start in the spring, follow it up about midsummer, and then right when we go into fall, treat again. You want to start getting them mite levels even lower as we're heading towards winter so we can have healthy bees to go into winter. So spring, midsummer, and late summer, early fall is the big 3 treatment times. So I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question for you there. Let's go right on to the next question. I struggle with taking stings to the face, neck, hands, forearms, and torso. Any tips? Well, I guess my first question is, and I have to ask this, I mean, there is people out there that don't believe in using smoke. Are you one of these people that don't use a smoker? And at the same time, why are you not wearing any protective gear? From all the things you're listing here, it looks like a nice vented bee jacket would do you wonders and probably make beekeeping a lot more enjoyable. I understand though that those jackets can be upwards of $200 if you want a good one, 150, $200 if you want a real good one. And my first few years of beekeeping, I mean, beekeeping is expensive. Time you buy your hive equipment, your treatments, your bees, it's just like, wow, this is extremely expensive. And I didn't have the money to go buy protective gear. So I went to Tractor Supply, got me a nice thick button-up shirt with long sleeves. I think it's like a light tan color. Like I said, it buttoned up the front here. And what I did was I took some little pieces of Velcro and I stitched them right between the buttons all the way down the front of the shirt. So I could button it up and then just take my hand and go down the front and it would close all the gaps with the Velcro. And then I had one of those simple veils that you just put over your head and you tie. And that worked very, very well for me the first probably 2 or 3 years. And then I was able to save up enough money from my first honey harvest to acquire a nice beekeeping jacket, which I think I got from Man Lake, if I remember correctly. But I've since upgraded and got a different jacket. But anyway, yeah, I would suggest some protective gear and maybe some smoke if you're not using that. And give the smoke a chance, some time to work. You know, you just can't squirt it in there or puff it in there and go right in. You got to give it a few seconds to let it move around the hive and do its thing. So hopefully that helps you out there. Okay, let's move right along here. 4-year beekeeper, 10 strong hives, 30 miles south of you. Oh, wow, they're pretty close. Figuring out the flow and optimizing when to super them. Also, this year, swarming seemed unbelievable. I caught several. 4-year beekeeper, 10 strong colonies. Okay, so this takes me back to my first few years. Here at my home, in my general area, there's not very many beehives. I mean, you would have to really, really look in people's yards to find a beehive. And when I first introduced bees here on my property, I kind of got the bee fever the very first year, and I went from the one swarm that I caught out here on my pin oak tree and started doing swarm removals and cutouts and different things like that. So my first year, I think I was up to around 10 colonies. And not all of them made it all the way through the year, of course, but I can remember having to feed a bunch the first 5-6 years. And somebody told me, and it kind of made sense and it stuck with me, that when you take bees to a new area that hasn't had bees for a while, it can take some time for the resources, the trees and the flowers in the area, to get pollinated and spread, I guess. When a tree hasn't been pollinated for a while, it may only have 50 to 100 blooms on it. You get it pollinated, and each year you'll start noticing more and more and more blooms on them trees. So that made me think, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I do need to keep feeding and letting my bees just keep working the area and see what happens. And I tell you, I started in 2009, and here we are, 2024. Wow, it just seems unreal. And the last 8-10 years, I really don't do a whole lot of feeding. And I really believe that my bees have increased the flow in my area. Now, granted, it does take rainfall and the weather to provide for the nectar flow to be there. But I do really strongly believe that after you put pollinators in an area, each year it just starts getting better and better and better and better. But it's not something that comes easy. You just got to keep working at it, keep managing your bees, keep feeding your bees, supplementing when needed, until you get to where there is a nice flow in your area. Now, as far as when to put supers on, a lot of people come right out in the spring, and by early May, they've got the supers on. And the reason for that is here in Ohio, we got the black locust tree. That's one of Ohio's best nectar producers. I've seen my hives gain 7 pounds in one day from that nectar flow. So that's a really good nectar flow, weather providing now, because the last couple of years we've had frost and it's greatly hurt the locusts. So I would get your supers on the early part of May. And personally, I would remove them before the goldenrod flow. I've stated before, the goldenrod flow is nothing to rely on. It's a big gamble to wait to remove your honey supers until after the goldenrod has burned out, because now the goldenrod's gone. We're now in colder temperatures, and you still have to supplement feed. And if they didn't get much from the goldenrod, this is where you're at. So I strongly suggest removing the honey supers before the goldenrod flow and start building them up, start supplementing, treating for mites and all that good stuff. As far as swarming, yes, swarming was unbelievable last year. And, there's not really a big mystery to why bees swarm. It's mainly because we're not able to keep up. You take a box, a 10 frame colony, and you let the queen start busting it out for me here. She'll start laying. It's usually the end of February, beginning of March. She'll start laying nice brood patterns. And usually by mid to late March, I've got drones. So if you take that information and you think about it, if she gets into April, May, that 10 frame box is now starting to get pretty full. The reason bees swarm is simply because the queen ran out of room to lay. And she decided, hey, I've got to go find somewhere else to lay. So if we, as the beekeeper, can take the time, as much as needed, to get into our hives and make sure the queen always has a place to lay, then swarming would never be a problem. But here's the issue. Once we get into spring, there's a nectar flow. And that nectar flow needs to go somewhere, right? So the foragers bring it back to the colony and they start putting it in cells. Those cells are very crucial for the queen to have a place to lay. So if we're not in our boxes quite frequently in the spring because of the flow and the way the queen's laying, it doesn't take very long and all them cells are plugged up, and before you know it, there's a queen cell. So it's not super hard to really understand why bees swarm. The harder part is to make time around it as the beekeeper to get in there and manage what we need to manage. I had several of my colonies swarm last year, and it was for that same reason. I had boxes stacked up. They were full of bees. There was no place to lay, so the queen hijacked it out of there with half the colony. Luckily, I caught a lot of them, but there was a couple of them that flew away. So hope that helps you out there. All right, Peter. The heat for old keeper and bees. Partial shade feels better, but the small hive beetles are a problem. Any new solution? But I tell you, I had a small hive beetle infestation a few years ago. It's probably been 5-6 years ago now that I think about it, but I had them for 2 years. And during that time, I was a strong believer that small hive beetles could actually be worse than varroa mites to manage. And my thought for that was, or my reasoning for that was, is we have all these different treatments that kill varroa mites. What do we have that actually kills small hive beetles? There's not really a whole lot. There's a lot of suggestions, a lot of different tricks, and I even played around with trying some tubed entrances, a little tube sticking out the front of the colony, and that was the only way for the bees to get in. My thought behind that is hive beetles can't hover like a helicopter, like a bee can. So they weren't able to go into the tubing. And it did greatly reduce the number of hive beetles in my colony, but it did not stop them. There's also a hive entrance called the guardian hive entrance. The way it's shaped and the way that you have to get in through the entrance kind of tricks the small hive beetle, and they're not able to get in, or at least not in the numbers that we're seeing without the special entrance. So those are all fine and well, but I found that they didn't work 100%. So what I ended up doing was trying some beneficial nematodes, and I'll leave a link for that down in the description of this video if it's something you're interested in. I introduced those nematodes to my soil 3 times. I did it in the spring one year, I followed it up that fall, did another treatment, and then the following spring I treated the soil a 3rd time. Now, you might be thinking, why did you treat the soil so much? They must not be very good. Well, here's the thing. Beneficial nematodes need a moist soil, and our summer climate, it just wipes them out. It's too dry, we're not getting the rainfall, therefore the nematodes die off. The interesting part is about the nematodes is you apply them to the soil around your colonies, and for every hive beetle larva they find in the soil, it makes more nematodes. So they spread, they get thicker, you get more of them. So that's pretty cool. Kills one of our pests, and the warriors grow stronger. The downside is the dry climate does kill them. So you have to apply them a few times. So those nematodes and changing some of my practices in the bee yard completely stopped the small hive beetle. Now, I had some bad habits out in the bee yard. I was one that would find some burr comb in a colony, I'd ball it all up, and I'd set it over on the next colony, thinking, when you're done going through all these colonies, you walk back through here and you'll pick up all your wax before you go in. Well, Jason always got hot and tired and ready to sit down and drink something cold after he got to the last hive, and he never picked up that burr comb. He'd come back the next inspection and he'd find it melted on the top of the hive lid or something like that. And basically, you think about it, what attracts small hive beetles? It's the smell of the hive, the wax. And here I am leaving it all out in the bee yard saying like, hey, you're over here. I mean, it's like setting out a deer attracted. What's going to happen? The deer are going to come. So I changed my habits. Keep my bee yard a little bit cleaner now. There's no wax sitting around, and the beneficial nematodes have helped a lot. Now, there was some talk about the red and white peppermint candies, and how they would deter small hive beetles. I have not experimented with it, but there was a lot of talk about how well it worked. So I can't actually verify anything, but it might be worth trying. And what they were doing is taking these candies and putting one in each corner of the hive of each box. So if you've got 3 boxes, you would need 12 pieces of candy. And they would set them in there, and they found that the bees would eat it, and the small hive beetles did not like it. So there might be something to that. But the beneficial nematodes, they're definitely beneficial to the beekeeper. So that's something I would check into. And like I said, I'll leave a link for that down below. Biggest issue I have is balancing my time between the bees and a full-time job, 12-hour shifts. Yeah, I get it. I totally get that. As a homesteader, that is the biggest problem I have with my bees, is finding time to work the bees. And a lot of times I find that the time that I set aside to work my bees, I'm cramming. I'm in a rush. I'm not doing it the way I used to do, where I would go into it nice and slow and I would enjoy the whole thing. Now it's like a rush, and I feel like it's became more of a job, and I don't like that. I want it to go back to the way it was. I mean, I still enjoy it. Obviously, that's why I have the bees, but I don't enjoy being rushed, I guess, or not being able to enjoy the time. It feels like more of a job. And I don't really have the answer for you there, bud. I do totally get what you're saying. Um, you know, I don't know where you're located, but I'm here in Central Ohio, and I get the winter off from the bees. I go out every couple weeks, make sure they have a little bit of food on top of the colony, and that's about the extent of it. And I look forward to the time away from the bees, just because something on my list of things to do every day gets knocked off for a little while. And Jason's like a little dance party over here. He's all excited. And then spring comes back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to cram all this in here? But it's something I've struggled with for the last probably 5 years. And it gets to be a little much at times. And the bad thing about us beekeepers is we just keep adding more colonies and making the task even harder. Or the colonies divide themselves and make our task a little harder. Like I said, bud, I don't have the answer for you, but I totally sympathize with what you're saying. 12-hour shifts. I have a couple friends that work 12-hour shifts. They go in, say, work a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday, and that's their whole week. 36 hours done. So I don't know if yours is like that, or if you're 5 days a week, or how that works. But yeah, I totally sympathize with you there, bud. I hope it all works out. I hope you're able to find that balance in your life, that you can make time for your bees. And hey, if not, just call off sick one day maybe and go out there and take care of your bees and enjoy it the whole day. Okay, so the next question, Foxhaven Hives. If a hive is getting new bees all the time and there's a large colony, why am I not getting more honey? 2 colonies and only 4 gallons, 50% wooded rural area. Well, yes, in the summer and the growing season, the colony should be growing at all times, unless there's something wrong with the performance of the queen. Personally, though, 2 colonies, 4 gallons, I think he did pretty good. And this may fall back onto what I spoke about earlier about having bees in your area for a longer time. And you'll notice those 2 colonies will make more than 4 gallons as time passes. Being in a 50% wooded area, that's a good thing. Trees produce a ton of nectar, depending on what trees you got in your area, but that's definitely a good thing. And then being in a rural area, that's the place to be, if you ask me, country boy here. So yeah, I think just give it a little bit more time. I really don't think 4 gallons is horrible. I think that's pretty good. Um, Not a whole lot of insight for me to share on this one, but I hope I did help a little bit. Okay, Brian, how to getting. I bet I typed that wrong when I transferred it over to this banner. How to get bees to stay in the mating nukes. Okay, so when you're making up mating nukes, I'm assuming that your bees are flying back to the colony that you made them from. And the reason for that being is that you collected foragers, not nurse bees. You need nurse bees to make up your mating nukes. You put nurse bees in your mating nukes, they've never had flight lessons. They don't have any sense of direction. Um, they're not going to be able to fly back to their home colony. So you definitely want to make sure you're getting nurse bees, and you can get them off of frames of brood. So one way to do that is you can remove your queen from your colony and then go through the colony, all the frames of brood, and shake them into an empty box or a tub. Um, After you get them all in the tub, get you some sugar water and a spray bottle and just mist across the top of them. And that'll cause them to all start cleaning each other and eating, and not so much worrying about climbing up the sidewalls of the tub. After you do that, get you a little 1 cup measuring cup and put 1 to 2 cups of bees in each mating nuke, depending on their size. And that's all I do, and it works out really, really well. But if you do not get nurse bees, you're definitely going to have a problem. And it sounds like that could be your problem, Brian. That sounds like you're getting a lot of foragers in the mix. You probably make up your mating nukes and think, boy, that looks like an awesome population. Come back the next day and there's like 10 bees. Been there, done that. The problem is the foragers. Marion Berry Bees. How do you set up your drone mating yard considering queens go further than drones to avoid breeding with the same stock? I don't actually set up drone mating yards, to be honest with you. What I do when I raise my queens, I just make sure that my colonies have drones, and that tells me that all the feral colonies in my area most likely have drones too. Now, you don't want to go by the first sign of seeing a drone. You got to give them some time to mature. I wouldn't go by a bull that's 1 year old and think he's going to breed my cow herd. He's not mature. So I've got to wait another 8 months to a year before that bull is mature enough to actually keep up with all of my cows. And, a drone only mates once, but you want him to be mature. So, give him another 3 weeks after you see drones in your hives before you think about queen rearing. So for me, that's usually March before I start seeing drones. So if I wait another 3 weeks, let's say month, now we're into April. April, the weather's still a little bit dicey here in Ohio. So I prefer to wait till May to do my queen rearing. I mean, I could do it in April. It's really tricky because you're struggling against the weather, and it can be a lot. And sometimes those cells can get chilled and the whole time was wasted. So I find it best to wait until about May before I do any of my queen rearing. And I don't usually do that until about the 2nd to 3rd week of May. So no mating yards for me, drone mating yards. What some people do though is they'll go a couple miles outside of their area from where their bee yard is, and they'll set up their drone congregating areas or their drone mating areas, and that's how they're set up. But that's nothing I practice. Boy, I just don't have the time to even think about something like that. My biggest problem is assessing the queen's performance. It would be great to know when to replace the queen before she becomes a big problem. Yeah, this can be a tricky one too. A few years ago, I had a queen that was 4 years old, and she was laying like a champ in the spring. And I knew in the back of my mind I should probably be pinching her, but I didn't. I thought, boy, she's laying great. I'm gonna let her keep going. Well, I came back midsummer and checked her, and the colony went womp womp womp. The queen had died, and the colony was now falling on its face. It looked like they had tried to raise some queen cells, but those didn't develop correctly, or something happened, and they were queenless. So I ended up combining them with another colony. So the easiest way to assess your queen's performance is to keep an eye on the brood pattern when you're making inspections. You also want to know in the back of your mind when you go into each colony, how old is this queen? Was she just put in there last year? Is she only a year old? If she's only a year old, a lot of times I'll let them ride out if they've got a nice brood pattern. You also want to look at your queen. How does she look? Does she have any tears on her wings? She have all of her legs? She have both eyes? How's her antennas? Just take a quick look at her. See how she looks overall, and then look at your brood pattern. If your brood pattern's starting to get spotty, which means she lay some over here, and she'll go over here and lay some, and might lay a little bit down here, and then she goes to a different frame. That's a spotty frame. If she's laying out a nice large brood pattern across the whole frame, that would be my advice. Check the queen, check the brood performance, and go from there. Now, if she's getting to where she's 3 years old, I would check her often, because she's getting to that age where she could just fail at any moment. Sometimes you're best just to go ahead and replace her and not go by the large brood pattern that you're seeing, even if she is 3. Safest bet sometimes is just go ahead and pinch her and get her replaced. It's for the health of your colony, right? And we don't want to see anybody's colony fall on their face. So there you go, folks. I hope that's been insightful for you. I took a little time in the last couple of days and made up all these little banners from the questions, and done my best here to answer them. I hope it was insightful or helpful. So if you got any more questions, you can leave them down below this video, and we'll use them in the next Q&A with Jay. I appreciate your time today, and we'll see you in the next one. If you're down there at the convention and you're watching this, the convention must not be very good, because you're watching YouTube when you should be inside talking to beekeepers. Anyway, have a good one, folks, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching JC's Beekeeping.